RugbyRenegade.com, the #1 online strength and conditioning program for rugby. Are you ready to get bigger, stronger, fitter, and faster and dominate your opposition? Welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast, where we build machines.
Hello and welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Pro Athlete Supplementation. Check them out at pas-nutrition.co.uk for all your supplementation needs. And don't forget that subscribers to the Rugby Renegade program get a 40% discount on retail prices.
Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Rugby Renegade Podcast. My name is Jamie Bain and today I interview Ian Taplin, strength and conditioning coach with Richmond RFC and with Arete Performance. Really great interview. Really goes into detail and tons of stuff and some great kind of discussion around a few different issues. So really think you're going to enjoy this one. Give it a listen and let us know what you think.
Hi Ian, welcome to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. Great to have you on. Let's start as we always do, and you tell us a little bit about your background and some of the team sports you work with.
Cool. Cheers, Jamie. Thanks for having me on. So my background is I'm formerly sort of an older S&C coach, I guess you say, is when I sort of decided I wanted to do this. There wasn't really a clear progression path, or it wasn't a career path as it is today, where people decide to go study S&C and have that sort of progression from university. And so I went to Loughborough. I knew I wanted to be involved in sport. Knew I wasn't good enough to be in sport, so coaching was always the vehicle that I saw myself getting into that realm. So I graduated from Loughborough in '96. Did a master's in sociology and sports management, as that was the area that was quite interesting to me in terms of human beings. It's always been the thing that sort of interested me most with working with players. And from there I went into teaching, and then I was still trying to find a route into coaching S&C. So I was doing lots of sports coaching and physical stuff with people, working in gyms, that sort of thing. And eventually I went into teaching, so I started lecturing in sports science at an FE college, and then did that for 2 or 3 years and really enjoyed it. But I was like, I need to just take a punt here. How am I going to get in? Who do you know? Because it was particularly rugby being my sport, was such a new field at that time. How did you get into professional sport if you didn't know anyone? And I saw a job at the RFU as a development officer. I got that, and from that, literally made some connections, met some people. Someone offered me, a guy I worked with was like, I've got Richmond looking for an S&C coach, and I literally just trained with him. We just worked out together because we worked together, and he was like, yeah, I think you'd be quite a cool fit for them, and went down there, and effectively that's how my S&C career got started. So I did 4 years with Richmond. I then ended up at London Irish for 2 seasons working in the academy there. And then went to Wasps and spent 11 years at Wasps. At the same time, I did a bit more consulting with London Scottish. So I crossed over from Richmond to Scottish, which was always an interesting conversation. And then did a little bits of consultancy, did 11 years with Wasps, went through the whole sort of structure in terms of academy, did some 3 seasons with the first team, and then finished off as performance manager in the academy after the move up to Coventry, and then left there at the end of this year and end of last season, and currently working for Arete Performance with my good friend Tom Farrow.
Cool, yeah. So tons of experience, and I was going to bring it up at some point, but I mean you've touched on working overseeing the development of the academy. So what's your approach to developing young players?
It's always a very interesting one, because there's always a rush to get people to that end point. So and people are always making judgments of these kids. Oh, he's not big enough, he's strong enough, he's not fast enough, because largely they're being compared to the end product of a full-grown professional rugby player who could have 10 years of full-time training, and it's a very difficult comparison to make. So it's always trying to temper people's sort of judgments of young players in terms of what they are. So my philosophy has always been very much let's try and develop them athletically as well as we can. Let's not try and rush things, because they're growing and changing, and there's so much stuff going on, psychologically as well as physically. And just give them time. The key thing with young people and young players is you've got to give them time. And it's not rocket science when you get an 18-year-old kid in a senior academy and they go, well, he's not ready. Well, yeah, that's because he's an 18-year-old kid. He's just come out of school. He's probably not ready for Premiership rugby. There's always the outliers who are, or by necessity get chucked in. But the vast majority need that time to develop physically, but more importantly, tactically and technically in the right way to actually be able to progress into those professional ranks, because it's a difficult thing to do to become a elite level sportsman. So you've got to really give them time, and you've got to nurture them within that time in terms of what they actually need to be successful. So I think that's the key thing, is like not trying to force things into those young players to rush their development. Actually give them the time to develop so they can actually have a long career, rather than smashing weights into them, because they all need to be bigger apparently. So just let them grow. They will grow, and funnily enough they go, oh look, he's got really big now, and he's really good, he's really strong, he's moving really well. So yeah, because you've just given him the time rather than trying to make it happen tomorrow. And that's the whole thing, is they might need 2-3 years depending on the position to be even anywhere near, and it's just actually persevering with them and accepting, some of these kids could be a 5-year project. And obviously for professional sport, that's not necessarily what people want to hear, because they need results on a Saturday.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think sometimes we fall into the problem of sort of the self-fulfilling prophecy, where you compare all the young kids as they come in, and kind of you've already decided how they're going to succeed, but you can't really tell. You've got to give them all the best opportunity to develop over that time, like you said. And sometimes it's surprising who actually does come through.
There's always loads of kids that you look at, and you can't help it, because we're human beings, we have eyes, and the first thing we notice is like, wow, he looks massive, he looks really athletic, and what it's a natural thing, because that's you're assessing them from a physical perspective, that you're going to be drawn to that. So it's taking that backward step and going, okay, let's have a look at the other qualities that they might need to be in the sport.
Yeah. And I can think of a player we were speaking about a couple of weeks ago, actually, but I won't mention his name. But there's some boys who are kind of almost put us out of a job, because in the gym they're not necessarily the top lifters or the most explosive, but they've got something on the rugby pitch, and it's not that S&C isn't important. It's just that can help make them better as a better athlete on the pitch. Sometimes people think you pick the team based on their lifting stats, but you can never do that, can you?
No, and I think that's part of the sort of the way where professional sport and S&C has gone. We've got so much data, and we're so data heavy, and numbers are really nice to look at, because they can give you, particularly from an S&C perspective, if you look at strength numbers, it validates what you're doing, and there's a lot of pressure on S&C coaches to validate what you're doing, in terms of, oh, look, I've made them stronger, I've made them fitter, therefore I shouldn't be getting fired if we're not winning. It shouldn't really be about that. It should be about making sure you're preparing them for the demands of the sport and being able to be successful at that. How much you squat or bench or push or pull, whatever, will have an effect, but it's not the key determining factor. What we talk about this a lot with Tom and myself about, the best players are the best players, and the physical qualities that you develop with them are to support them in being the best players. You look at most of the top end players, they're all fantastic, actual tactical players, and some of them you look at them physically and go, wow, how has that happened? Because they're not necessarily physically tearing up trees, but because they're technically tactically so astute, and if you're bringing up their physical aspects all the time, they're getting better and better. So it's just that the physical stuff is very easy to measure, and that's why it's quite easy to hang your hat on it and go, look, we've made this kid's really strong, really powerful, and that definitely gets kids through the door. And it's actually being able to step back over some variables that we can't really measure that accurately, and we just need to give them time.
Yeah. And just out of interest, with your experience with developing players, what do you think is kind of a limitation that they have? Is it we don't have enough time to kind of develop them physically, or is it some of them get in that kind of trap where they're in between senior team and A team, so to speak, and they don't get enough game time to develop that tactical, technical?
I think it's individual based. It's dependent on the player. Some guys need clearly physical development, but part of that physical development might be that they just need to grow. So you can't really rush, you can't really change that. That's going to happen when the body says they're ready to grow. So you might go, look, he is a bit small and we can keep training him, but there's no point overly forcing the training from a physical aspect, because it's just things aren't happening chemically, which mean it's ready to really kick off. So you keep working on those components, and a lot of times we don't work on what their strengths are, we focus on what they can't do, and sometimes like, well, what's their point of difference? What is their X factor? What's the thing that sets them apart? It could be speed or whatever. So let's work on that as well. Let's really focus on that and build that aspect up, so that becomes a real super strength, and working on the things they can't do. Some kids might be physically absolute demons, and therefore you go, well, okay, that's your super quality, but you can't pass or catch. So we really need to address that. And it's just about marrying up what they need at various times, I think. So that would be that. That's the key thing. And that gap between when they sign at 18 and trying to break in is tough, because squads, particularly in the Premiership, are getting stronger in terms of being able to get players in from abroad, etc., and the financial pressures of staying in the Premiership. So how those young kids actually get opportunities to play is clearly important, because working in the Championship, you can see that this is a tough league, and there are a lot of 18, 19-year-old kids who struggle to get into many of the Championship teams on a regular basis, because there's a lot of good players down here. So whose responsibility is it then from that age group in terms of giving them playing time, because guys in the Championship's jobs are on the line as well. So it's a very difficult development sort of conundrum in terms of how do you give those players the opportunity to actually play.
Yeah, I agree. And like what you said, is obviously you always want to work on someone's weakness, but you don't want to do it to a point that it takes away their strengths. Like, if it's someone who's small but they're explosive and dynamic, and all you do is hypertrophy training, and they end up being slow and losing that point of difference, then you've ruined their career. So like you say, you've got to keep focusing on their strengths as well. So it's really good advice.
Yeah, it's also looking at it in context. Obviously there's so much analysis and people looking at data, looking at stats and talking about momentum, but a lot of it isn't looked at in context. So people go, oh look, his momentum score is it's really high. So does he win collisions? Does he win contacts? Does he actually produce quick ball at rucks? And that's it's a marrying up that actual, okay, this is the data of his momentum score is poor, let's say, but he actually breaks contract because he's really awkward, or he's actually evasive and whatever, and is able to actually get you over the gain line. It's actually looking at the outcome on the performance on the field, rather than the numbers that you think the metric is telling you, actually having it in context. So I always look at, when people say, oh, this guy's, he's got a great momentum score, he's really big and powerful. So, okay, well, let's have a look at, does he actually win collisions? Because that's actually what he has to do if that's his role as a ball carrying, type 5 forward or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about, numbers and gym scores and things earlier, and often I think a lot of Rugby Renegade sort of followers will know that we understand that strength is hugely important, but you get to that diminishing returns point where you need to start focusing more on power. So what would you say is kind of strong enough for a rugby player before they start focusing more heavily on power development?
Yeah, I think the key thing is being availability is the best ability, and that's what I see a lot of the strength work for. It's obviously to enhance performance, but also to protect performance. So if people are durable and robust, because people often associate strength work with, your bench, your squat, your push and your RDL potentially in terms of, right, we get them strong in those core lifts, but it's all the other stuff around it which actually keeps you on the field. That's still strength work. So being, looking at, we want people to be able to squat, good numbers and push good numbers, etc. But are we doing the work around that actually makes them available? Because it's no good someone having a fantastic squat on a bench, but they're constantly injured because they haven't worked the other muscle groups, or the actual context of what they needed to do on the pitch isn't being protected. So the way we approach things, we with the guys at Richmond and the girls at Richmond, we in season we're all doing power work in terms of we do lots of jumps. I think that's the best way of our guys and girls developing force. We lift, we lift as much as we can. We don't go maximal at very many points through the season, just because we don't think we need to lift super heavy to actually still get the strength effects that we need to see on the field. So we won't be lifting singles or doubles at all through the year. We use velocity-based approach in many cases, to look at the bar speed, and the players are bought into that, understanding why we're not working at max loads and why we're trying to move the bar quickly, and how working at different bar speed is having a different strength effect. And we've seen pretty good returns in that, in terms of training sub-maximally, particularly in the season, can still keep you strong and actually get you stronger in many cases. So it's that, people often like to feel a lot of weight on the bar psychologically, but sometimes it's not developing the property and what you want. It's potentially just making you tired for your performance on a Saturday. So it's trying to understand what are we training them for, which is to play rugby on the Saturday and be successful, and making them see why we're trying to train them in a particular way. So we do a lot of submaximal lifting. We've got lots of guys who need to be a lot stronger, but you can't sacrifice chasing strength numbers for everything. So you have to factor in that if we're smashing them 4 or 5 times a week with weights, lifting really heavy, it's potentially going to have a negative effect on what we're actually preparing them to do. So it's just balancing that up and accepting it might take a bit of time.
Yeah, that's my experience as well. You can get a lot stronger lifting sub-maximally. I think it's often a mistake young sort of strength coaches make when they've come out of uni and they've seen all the research saying, for strength you've got to lift over 80% 1RM and close to failure. But it's not necessarily. Like, once you've experienced sub-maximal lifting, you see that boys can make progress, and like you say, they're still fresh to perform on a Saturday. Then it's a no-brainer, really. Now, I should have asked you this question earlier on because we've covered quite a lot already, but what's your kind of overall strength and conditioning philosophy?
I'm very much a movement-focused sort of coach. So, strength and conditioning it's a funny title because it only covers 2 things. I've always been fascinated by speed. I think people moving quickly, it's just blows your mind when you see people who can really, really run. And that's the biggest point of difference I feel for high-end performers, is from a physical perspective, is that they have speed. There's very few field sport players, particularly in the more attacking positions, who don't have speed. Speed is the biggest thing that puts players, it buys them time, doesn't it? You can make a slightly poor decision, but if you've got a bit of speed, you can get out of it, and that's the property that I like to develop the most. So everything in my head is leading towards trying to make them quicker, because I think that's any position. That's the key thing. Those milliseconds in games that change things for you. So the example that springs to mind is on Saturday we had a tight head prop who sprinted 60 meters to stay on the inside to try to force the player to produce a skill, and they messed up the skill. Now, if he hadn't been there sprinting and being confident as a tight head to sprint 60 meters, they score, and that those are the moments that change the game. So for me, that's the biggest transfer into the game, is make players quick and able to cope with producing lots of quick movements and efforts in a game. That's what will potentially alter the scoreline more than anything else. So making sure that they're actually fast, understand why they're getting fast, how to get fast, and I think general fitness levels, how we actually get players fit. I think very often we get people tired. We don't necessarily develop the actual energy system qualities. And I think that's the key thing, particularly when you have professional sports teams. You have a lot of time, and there's that pressure to maybe do more than you need to do. And players like to feel they've had throwing up in a bin session isn't necessarily what's actually going to produce the best results. And it's, you've got to build up that confidence in yourself as a coach to go, we don't actually have to flog you to actually make you fitter and ultimately help you produce the performances you want on the pitch. So for me, it's all about movement, how people move, efficiency of movement, and speed and fitness. That's what interests me. Strength's nice because it's easy to measure and it looks good, and people look good in a t-shirt. But for me, it's about people moving quick and being fit. Those are where I sort of hang my hat on the different components, really.
Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense, and like I say, strength's important, but ultimately what strength developing, you want to use strength to develop that speed on the pitch and the robustness to maintain fitness as well.
And everyone likes to be more athletic. Props want to be able to move around and sidestep, and they need to. And if you can, they've got to focus more on certain different aspects of strength training. They've got to be able to stay in the fight in the scrummage, need isometric strength, and work on that. But they also need to be able to sprint back at various times or carry at pace. So developing those properties, and it's a huge confidence thing for a player. Think I've actually got a little bit. If I need to, I can put the toe down. There's going to be something there.
Yeah, and also on your last point, we've both worked in the Championship and the Premiership in, half part-time and full-time environments, and I agree with what you said. Sometimes because Premiership sides and some of the Championship sides now obviously are full-time, they kind of think, we've got to train from 9 till 5, and like you say, you just build up fatigue. Then you're better off training for short periods intensely, and then the rest of the time is so you can recover effectively, so you can then repeat that again and get better, not just flog a dead horse, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the monotony of it as well, because it's a long old season, and if you're turning up every day or 4 days a week, and it's days are dragged out because people feel they need to drag the days out to keep people there and have that whole, you'll be full time, so we've got to fill the day out. It's like, well, how quick could you get the day done? How quickly could you get everything done, get people away, get them not thinking about rugby for a few extra hours, challenge their brains in different ways, and that I think is the challenge of professional sport now. Is like, we've become very science based and maybe lost touch a little bit with the humanistic aspects of what people need day to day in their life. I think that's going to be a potentially where things start to tip a little bit more in the future.
And also, although you're saying we've gone more science based, there is science coming out, like looking at cognitive loading and kind of neural fatigue around having those long days and excessive training, which means you don't have that intensity of training in your second day, so to speak.
Absolutely. That's the whole thing, isn't it? Whatever you do today shouldn't impact on what you do tomorrow, and that's where, and it's, the science is brilliant. There's so much good stuff. It's actually using it in the right way, isn't it? Selecting the bits that are going to be pertinent to actually enhancing the performance, and that whole idea of the load and what you're trying to do day to day, I think is where it's got a real role to play in terms of actually guiding the training, and making it more specific to what you're actually trying to achieve, and looking after the players and understanding the psychosocial aspects and how that relates to the physical aspects and everything with it.
Yeah, definitely. Now, this is a question we ask all the guests on the podcast, and what do you think is the biggest mistake rugby players make when it comes to strength and conditioning?
I think they look at strength and conditioning as a separate entity from the sport. I think they look at it in terms of, right, I need to get stronger, or I need to get quicker, or I need to get fitter, and they look at it as a silo away from the game. And I think that's the big thing there. Or they use it as a cushion or a crutch. Like, look, I've got really strong, really fast, really quick, or really big, whatever it is they're trying to achieve. But they've maybe overcommitted so much time to that, they've lost sight of why they needed to do it in the first place for the game. So I think just that aspect of focus on sport, look at what we need for the sport, and the S&C stuff is it's a process in time. If you invest time in S&C and you have a good program, good coaches around you, you're going to get those properties are going to develop. And I think that's the key thing. Is it's too easy for players to become very particularly gym focused, because it's the easiest thing to do and the easiest thing to see the results from, and to not look at actually the movement aspect of it and how that translates to the pitch, and seeing strength and conditioning as an athletic process rather than a process that takes place in the gym. I think we've got some fantastic athletes in this country in rugby, and if you look at them comparative to how other countries train, it's probably quite different. Not necessarily wrong, but with certainly things that we could probably do better to get that actual game transfer, I think. But I think players, particularly if they're not being picked, the first thing they do is look at a physical thing, they can develop more than a technical, tactical aspect potentially, because it's easier to actually tick off. Because look, I've got stronger. You asked me to get stronger, I've got stronger. It's that measurability.
Yeah, no, totally agree. It pains me to see a young player go and just do an extra arms and shoulders session in the gym when they should be working on their skills and their tactical awareness and things.
And I think that's the role of the S&C coaches, to understand, like you mentioned it earlier about how S&Cs and physical properties are really important, but they're there to sort of support them in what they're doing. And that's where S&C coaches need to be astute enough to go, what we're doing is really important, but it's not the most important thing in terms of you and your profession, and actually guiding them in that way. Because someone wants to come and do extra work with us, that's brilliant, but we have to then guide them and we have to be educated enough to go, but this is the stuff that's really going to help you get picked. So we can do this stuff, but you also need to go and do X, Y, and Z, which is the key thing that needs to push you on from a rugby perspective or whatever sport it is. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, for the guys coming into the industry now, is that they've come from a much more academic background, whereas much of us older coaches probably started off as coaches first rather than strength and conditioners. And maybe that's the thing that we need to look at with the development of our young coaches. How do we give them that holistic coaching opportunity, because there isn't that many opportunities for them to coach. If you come into a professional environment as an intern or whatever, you're probably doing a lot of mundane menial jobs and not really getting much actual coaching exposure. How do we get them that coaching exposure and that actual understanding of the demands of the game from a non-purely physical aspect?
Yeah. And is there anything you've done or implemented to kind of emphasize the rugby specific nature of what you've been doing S&C wise, to whether it's to get more buy-in from the players or help them understand that it's to drive the rugby program, not just the S&C?
Yeah, so we did we did some profiling at the beginning of the year. I mean, for us it was very much we came in and we didn't know any of the players, or there was one player left from when I was at Richmond the first time round. So it was a whole new group of players, and it was like, okay, we need to get some sort of baselines, know what we're dealing with, understand the actual championship in terms of what it looks like, what our strengths are as a squad, and what we're going to face on a week-to-week basis. So we did some profiling. We then individualised. We put players in groups based on the properties that we thought they needed to develop, be it strength, size, speed, power. So they all train in their own individual groups. And within that, there are extra little things that we need to do. But it's obviously, we see the guys twice a week for an hour at a time. We have other sessions in and around the week if they can make it. But we've learned to what's the biggest bang for our buck, basically. What we're going to do in the short amount of time that's going to have the biggest outcome. So we've invested heavily in that. We've given them the slightly individualised in terms of what they need in their positions. And then we've trained speed the whole year round in various forms. So we always do speed Tuesday, Thursday, be it linear or change direction or agility, with a rugby context as well. So our agility, a change of direction agility session will always have a learning component in terms of trying to put pictures in front of them that they'll come up against in the game and let them solve those problems. So we'll definitely move from a change of direction, which is a bit more prescriptive, where we're looking for a patterning, and then put them into a more chaotic environment, which will be reflective of what they'll face in a game, and see if they can transfer some of those movements into the scenario based on the information they get from it. That's the bit we're trying to do. We've got to increase the ability for our guys and girls to be successful from a skill level on the field. And making the right decisions physically will obviously help that. So as much as we can, any speed work that we do will have an aspect that is reflected very heavily with what they see in a game.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. I like the idea. I mean, there's a lot of debates about periodization and whether it's block periodization or linear or whatever, but more and more you seem to hear that people are including an aspect of speed, aspect of power, aspect of strength, but they just vary the kind of stimulus, like you've done with whether it's linear or change of direction. That's interesting to hear.
We definitely try and vary the stimulus in terms of, and that's why the velocity-based stuff is so good, because you can alter bar speed and load on the bar, which changes again what you're trying to develop. and and informing the athlete of that and why is the key thing. I think so that they buy into it and they understand it. But yeah, I mean, jumping is something we do all year round in terms of we'll have loaded, unloaded jumps, and plyometric based exercises particularly for our lateral components, because I think it's the easiest thing to teach as well when you've got limited space, lots of numbers.
Yeah.
It's pretty tough to try and go through Olympic lifting with someone who's never Olympic lifted, and you've got very limited time and space. So for us, I think jumping has a much better crossover anyway. Jumping is a huge part of what we do, jumping and sprinting.
Yeah. No, and again, it goes back to like saying when you've got a short period of time with the guys like you do in the championship, that you kind of figure out whether it's through trial and error. Obviously, your experience, you've done it before as well. You figure out what those big bang for your buck training modalities are, and you get the most out of them in that short period of time, and that's what it's all about, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, particularly for us, we're not going to be by nature of not being full time, we're not going to be able to put 10-15 kilograms on certain players to change us into a big lumpy pack or real heavy ball carrying backs, because if they're not going to have the time and their lifestyle's not going to allow them to recover from the training to do that. So we have to be, we can't go, we want to be a really big team and smash people in the tight phases, because we're not going to have that mass. We're not going to be able to put the extra weight on certain players. So it's not really worth trying to do that. Yeah, we'd get them stronger, and we just have to look at playing in a different way which best suits what we do. And I think that's if you can't force things into your constraints or your freedom is something we often talk about, and the limitations that we have allowed us to really dial down what's important and focus on that. And that's probably helped us in many ways, because we haven't sought out things which weren't time effective or achievable. We thought, well, these are things we can achieve with the resources and the time constraints we have, and we just backed on with it.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, oftentimes then in that full-time professional environment, you've got too much time, and you try and fill it and end up just building fatigue as opposed to actually improving things. So it's really, really interesting. Again, this is a question we ask all the guests. What advice would you give to an upcoming strength coach?
It's really difficult. I can't imagine now getting into the industry. It's so competitive. There's so many people, so few jobs, so many graduates every year. You've really got to want to do it. And I talk about being, for me, coaching is a calling, not a career. It's like, I think if I wasn't doing this, would I still coach? Because yeah, I would coach because I just love coaching. And I think it's changed over the years that people are now looking to get into it as a job. And if you want to do it as a job, first off, it's probably not for you. So I think they've got to be really, really certain that this is what I want to do, because it's going to be tough for long periods of the early stages and later on. There aren't that many really wealthy S&C coaches in professional sport, so you're not going to make a shed load of money. You've got to actually want to do it, and I think that's the key thing, is like, are you actually committed to this as something that makes you as a human being? This is something you need to do, is actually help develop and work with other people. If you're looking to I've interviewed lots of people in various roles, and they go, I want to be a first team S&C, head of S&C in 2 years. And you're like, okay, this is not for you, because you haven't got your eyes wide open at all. And you just got to want to coach people and go and seek out opportunities to coach. The best coaching I've ever done has been in the lowest levels of rugby or sport or other sports, where you've got so many things to deal with that if you can cope in those scenarios, once you turn up at a professional sports ground where you've got kitmen washing kit, people washing cones, laying them out for you, doing all the supplements, washing them up for you, it's easy. If you can cope with where you've got to do all that stuff, you're the kit man, you're the one making sure you're seeking out as much as you can to help the guys perform across the whole spectrum of the sport, not just your area. That's when you learn. And I think that would be the key thing, is like, drop down, go and work for if you want to be an S&C coach, volunteer at your local level 9 rugby club or whatever it is, and actually go and try and run a speed session or a warm up for 70 players. Brilliant. We have our interns who are working with us, fantastic, and we watch, and they'll be taking a warm up with 8 players on their own. It's like, that's an amazing coaching opportunity, isn't it? You're learning now to deal with 80 people, and you're getting them better at some speed mechanics and preparing them for the session. And that's what they need to do. You just need to go and coach as often as you can, and seek out people. Most people who are working in S&C have been through that, and they'll be happy to help. They'll give you advice if you approach them in the right way and demonstrate you're committed to it, I think.
Yeah, great advice. Now, tell us a bit about your work with Arete Performance and also your Lyceums that you've been putting on.
Yeah, so Tom worked with at Wasp on Farrow, who's works with England Sevens as well. So he's a super smart human being, an incredible philosophical outlook on life, and probably one of the smartest blokes you'll ever come across. So he set up Arete Performance 3 or 4 years ago. And when I left Wasp, we talked about various things we could do together in the future, and the sort of cards just fell in place with me leaving when I did. And an opportunity was coming up at Richmond, and we just discussed it. I said, well, why don't we just try and do it together? And from there, sort of Arete sort of grew out of that in its sort of current form. And we're both big learners, and we talked about the educational aspect, how some of the S&C training provision and learning stuff out there didn't really sit with us in terms of what we wanted to see or what we wanted to learn about, or the people we wanted to engage with. So we thought we'd just try and do a few things on our own. We got very fortunate, Halsey did the first one for us with Clive Brewer, which was interesting in terms of beyond belief, looking at, we talked about periodization and planning and what is it and does it exist and all that, and looking at the baseball model with Clive was fantastic. And how Halsey put together the Olympic program. So that was where it stemmed from. And then from there we stalked a few people, basically found out when they were in the country and rode a bit of luck, and we were very just see what happens in terms of we'll ask them, see what happens, and we got Dan Path to do ours. We got Carlo Biccicelli, which was again fantastic, and Alexander Navas when they were over for the World Champs. Like the Cuban, how their jumps team work is wow, that's something you should definitely investigate. So Tom had been over to Cuba and had that connection, so that was great to get them. And we just asked people, and the whole format is very much, it's not presentations, there's no accreditation from it. You haven't got to attend to get points. It's literally keep it as cheap as we can, because we want to hear these people speak, and we will get as many people in the room as possible to make it a really worthwhile learning experience. So getting Dan Path was awesome, and then we've got Buddy Morris on the back of that, and that's the sort of caliber of coaches that we think we want to learn from. And it's been pretty cool when you're sitting in the room and you see 70 other coaches who are Premiership, head of national teams are there, going, well, they've come to an event that we've put on, and we've got Dan Path and Buddy Morris standing at the front. It's pretty mind blowing. So yeah, that's where that sort of sprung out of our own desire to listen to those guys and make those connections. So we've got a few things lined up for later on in the year. Just need to tie a few loose ends up, so that will be back out there again, and just want to develop a community where people can come and talk. So the evenings are very informal. The guys will talk, might be 40 minutes. We didn't stop Buddy Morris because he just kept going, so it was we just let him talk, because that was just awesome. So I think he did about 90 minutes before we thought we might have to stop just to have a little chat. And the idea is that you get to talk with the other guys in the room with long breaks, so you can chat with the other S&Cs and physios or coaches, whoever's there. And then we just sit around in a circle and we just talk. Everyone can put their opinion forward. You guys who might be just doing their first year of coaching, or might be first year of university, with guys who've been to Olympics, won national titles, won World Cups or whatever. And it's just a really cool way of meeting people and seeing that everyone's problems are probably fairly similar. Everyone's experiencing the same thing, and it's quite a nice sort of cleansing, I think, for S&C coaches.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. We had Nick Grantham on the podcast a while back, and we were sort of saying about the difficulties of being able to go on CPD events, when you're working week in, week out in rugby. And he was said, just invite people in yourselves, and obviously you've done that, and it's
Yeah.
a great opportunity for people to network with coaches of that kind of experience. Sounds awesome. And of course,
Yeah.
let us know when you've got one dialed in, and you know when your next one
Yeah,
is, and we'll share it with
we'll
our social media.
We'll definitely do that. And there's some good guys doing some good stuff around. You know, some of the football clubs are doing some really good little small events as well. I think that's the way it's going to go. People are going to try and make these little micro events where people can share stuff. So that's really I think really positive for us as an industry, let's say, you know, to have that ability to share and make it a bit more open and not quite so constrained.
Yeah, definitely. And just to wrap up, Ian, can you tell us a little bit more about where people can sort of learn more about you?
Yeah, so you can get us at on Twitter. I think it's Ian_Taplin. I think that's me. And then at Arete Performance HQ with an underscore between the Arete and Performance. And then just on the website, areteperformance.com. That's on there now. We've got our blogs going and bits and pieces. So we're starting to come alive on the social media and the web stuff now. So we've got ourselves a bit sorted out, and hopefully some more stuff will come out and we can share some of the mistakes and learnings that we've had.
Yeah, cool. Look forward to it, and of course we'll share all those links on the show notes. But Ian, thank you very much for your time. It's been like really good chatting to you. Probably could have gone longer, but I'll leave it there. But love to have you back on again, and or Tom as well. If he is, the most intelligent man you've ever met. So be great to have him too.
No, definitely. I'm sure Tom would love to come on.
Cool. Cheers, Ian. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Jamie. Take care.
Lovely stuff. Thank you, Ian. Really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us. And for you guys out there, please check out Arete Performance and their Lyceums. I'm sure that they've got a good one coming up, and it'll be well worth going. I'd love to see Buddy Morris speak, and maybe he's a good guy to get on the podcast. On that note, guys, if there's anyone you'd like us to interview, please get in touch. Make suggestions of potential guests and any questions you want answered on the podcast. That's what it's all about, giving you information, helping you improve your performance or performance of your athletes and players. So please get in touch, and of course subscribe to us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, or of course iTunes, and give us a 5-star review. Check us out at rugbyrenegade.com and on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube, and there are more podcasts on the way. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Renegade Podcast. For more quality rugby strength and conditioning information, check us out at rugbyrenegade.com. Rugby Renegade, building machines.